Not only do we have these iconic cars, it is just one of the stories that, Penny, if I feel like I tell this story, people will not believe me. The background of Shadow is just quite unbelievable. You begin with seeing that the logo is a cloak and dagger, but that is just the top line to your father, Don Nichols. Can you please, no one will believe me if I tell this story. Can you please tell us a bit about your father, his origins, where he started, where he got to, and then completely changed and got into motorsport?
Well, one never knows where a father gets a desire to do something, but he started out as a young boy in Missouri, riding a horse to school, meeting my mom, enlisting in the service way too early, being one of the paratroopers who went in on D-Day, telling us a lot of stories about that. Having traveled the world at that point and been involved in the war, taking my mom back to Japan, having one of my sisters over there, I was born later, and after being in Japan, I'm sure he made many contacts in motor racing and sports. He talks about some very fancy people getting involved in motorsports, hearing stories of putting airplane engines in cars, doing many different things. I guess he connected in Japan with Firestone and Goodyear, and after the war kept selling tires for both in the racing industry in Japan. From there, he had made money and spent a lot on Shadow.
So, just in short, your father was a spy.
I didn't say that.
No, are we not allowed to say that?
I don't say that.
Oh. Well, that's what, reading the book that came out in 2017, the cloak... Oh, okay, we cannot speak about...
I know nothing.
You know nothing. Okay, so the mystery continues.
The mystery continues.
Right. That is very exciting for me. I think that is really cool.
There are a lot of mysteries connected with Shadow.
Isn't that the perfect voice to say that? Trevor, could you do that again?
Many, many mysteries are connected with Shadow.
Dad was the perfect character. The eyes, the beard. For several races, he wore the hat and the cape, and it was quite fun.
Wow, that is just sensational. And really, it's what motorsport should be as well. Like, it is about the characters that we love and we engage with, and then we see their incredible machines out on racetracks, and it's wonderful to see decades.
They need more entertainment.
Yes. Well, let's talk about this beautiful machine next to us, Trevor, because it is really unlike anything else you can imagine. And
that's what it was supposed to be.
Exactly. So take us behind the ethos of designing something like this, which decades later still looks futuristic.
Indeed it does. And I'm really surprised today at just how good this car looks. It never looked like this in the old days. I mean, the brief period we had during which this car was being developed, which led to the later version, which is here, which is the orange car. This is the prototype. It never ran a race. And in 1970, when I left the project because we were broke, the last thing I expected was to see this car anywhere in the world after that. So to be here 57 years later is more than incredible.
It certainly is. Yes, round of applause. That is truly wonderful. It really, really is. I do have to ask, though, as this is the prototype, were there any other wild ideas that you had that didn't make it here?
Well, this car represents my best effort in 1968. That's when I started the design of this car. But I'd been a race car builder and designer for a long time before that, strangely long time before that, because I had designed and built my own personal sports car for the street. And that project, it was a two-frame, full independent car, That project started in 1959, just a few years back. So I had a street car, and then I got into motor racing. I mean, I was involved in high-performance cars from 59, really 53 on. That's a couple of years ago. So I was involved in Can-Am racing in the mid-60s with racing a Lola T70 with George Falmer. That was, I don't know if you folks remember him very much, but of course he was the driver of this car, and later he drove for Roger Penske and won the 1972 Can-Am with the Porsche 917 car. So anyway, George was a terrific driver and was the driver of the second version of this car.
Just, oh gosh, I could listen to it all day. Penny, I think what's so amazing is that your father wanted to make something so different and really disrupt motorsport at the time, and did it within Formula One, which is just the highest pinnacle of motorsport that you could possibly try and disrupt. What do you think his motivation was? Why did he want to do that?
He had a brain that was always thinking of the next thing, of aerodynamics. Mind you, I was young, very young, and talking about, and most dads don't talk to their little girls saying, we got to punch a small hole in the air and it'll make us go faster. I remember him saying that to us. So his idea, this car, he says it's no higher than my knee, and just making it go faster than everyone else. That desire to be the best, to be the fastest, was his ultimate goal.
And talking about you, of course, was motorsport something that you always wanted to be a part of? Or is it because it was family? Tell us a bit about you.
The desire was to be with my dad. I had to leave school early on Friday and fly out and come back on the red eye on Monday morning to go back to school. So it missed my senior prom, because if you do one or the other, you go racing or you don't have a family life. So he was all racing, and to be part of that, you went with him.
And of course now you continue his legacy as well.
I was grateful to be invited to be part of this mission. 50 years later, it's a little deja vu, a lot of deja vu, and it's been fun. I've actually brought my son, who's never had the chance to be at the track. So this has been a little bit of, the only word is deja vu.
Yeah, fantastic. And congratulations to you, because it takes, like you say, it's a lifelong dedication that you've had to continue this and make sure that people decades on can still enjoy it.
I didn't have anything to do with this beautiful recreation. I just was invited to come along. So we've been to Goodwood, we've been to some shows, and I come along and help with the color or lack of it.
She's being very, very humble here. She does an awful lot.
Penny has been a very valuable participant to this effort for the last several years.
And Trevor, let's talk about, very aptly put by Penny, punching a small hole through the air. Aerodynamics is really the core of this car and how it operates, of course. So what might be some elements of the design that people might overlook or not necessarily be able to see?
There are a lot of interesting elements to this design, some of which worked very well and some of which did not. That's why the future car doesn't look exactly like this. It didn't make as much downforce at the back as I thought we could get, and so it was basically lacking in net downforce, which was something that was really a necessity for proper balance on the car. But let me backtrack a little bit to, if I can, to the beginning of the car. And I'll try and be quick with this. So
no, take your time. We are all here for it.
So in late '68, I chanced to I was invited to have a dinner with a gentleman named Don Nichols, who was selling racing parts in Japan, had the Japanese distributorship of race tires from Firestone in Japan, and he was planning on moving to America. I had actually never heard of him before, but I met him at a lovely dinner in Los Angeles, and not too long after that, I got a phone call from him, and he said, I've got a 160 T160 Lola here that needs to be shipped to Japan for Pedro Rodriguez to run at Fuji Speedway. And could you install a big block 427 engine in this car for me and build an exhaust system and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I had a small shop in Costa Mesa, California at that time. So I said, yeah, Don, bring it down and we'll do it. So I did that. And while he was at my shop, just after I got finished with his T160 car, I decided I'd show him a project that I was on. And that project was to build a abnormally small Can-Am car. And at that time, my plan was to put possibly a Porsche flat 6 engine in the back of it. And at that time, I'd been entirely too familiar with the Corvair engines of that time, which are 6-cylinder flat engines, very low center of gravity, technically really interesting engines to this date. And so I showed him what I had in mind. And it was all drawings and plus a small extra large go-kart-like thing made out of just something to show what the size, a small version of what ultimately became this. But he fell in love with it and said, you know, we've got to do it. So I told him so he asked me if I'd ever considered putting a Chevrolet V8 in the back of something like I had in mind. And I told him, no, indeed. I hadn't thought about that as much as I should have. And that's quite unbelievable to me at this point because I'd been involved almost universally with Chevy V8s for, the past 7 years before that. Lots of cars with Chevys. Nobody with a Porsche flat 6 or God forbid, a Corvair flat 6. So anyway, I told him I'd make something out of cardboard and sheets of plywood that would give him an idea of what I had in mind. And that Herculean effort only took about 2 to 3 days. And what I showed him was something that when you looked at it, you had a feel for what it would be. It had a Chevrolet engine in the back sitting on a 2-inch thick block off the floor, and just a junkyard engine I got. And then it had the 18-inch diameter rear cardboard and plywood wheels on it, and the 15-inch high cardboard and plywood wheels on the front. And that was enough to give him enough of an idea to once again, to really say, we've got to do this thing. So that was the beginning. It was in late '68, about November 1968, and the project was on.
Yeah. He's like, I'll take one. I'll have that, please.
So do you want me to continue a bit?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, continue us through the process.
I'll continue with the initial evolution of the car. So at that point, obviously, no company made tires. I mean, the existence of the car, or potential existence of the car, was totally a function of whether somebody would go out far enough on a limb to agree to make the tires. So both George Fulmer and I had been...
And drive it. And drive it.
And drive it. Yes, that's yet another issue. So that wasn't actually a problem, getting somebody to drive it, surprisingly enough. So as it turned out, George, Don and I both had intimate connections with Firestone, Don being a Firestone distributor in Japan, and me having run Firestone tires with George Fulmer on Lola T70 in 1967 in the American, very popular racing series in the United States at that time. So Don called Firestone and told him we had a project in mind, and could we come and speak to the people in the race tire development department. So we did. And I took a batch of drawings, small 8.5 by 11 promotional data sheets, I'll call them, and I showed what the potential top speed capability might be, and a number of technical advancements that if I could build a small car like this might give us a faster than normal race car. And the goals were not only to make a faster than usual Can-Am car, but to not reduce the cornering power. The hope was because of the ultra-low center of gravity, I could make a narrower car, but not sacrifice cornering power. So the challenge, there were multiple challenges at that time, obviously. And so we go to Firestone, and at the end of the meeting, the head of race tire development said, basically, we'll do it.
Wow. Which
was highly unexpected, not only unexpected and unheard of, and got them into a project that was way farther out than anything they'd ever done before for an automobile.
Yeah, that is really, really cool and absolutely sensational. Penny, can we just touch on the 1977 win in Formula One? That must still, to this day, mean so much to this team.
It was an amazing time. It was always difficult. There was always problems with the cars. There's problems with the drivers. Disagreements with drivers, but it was an amazing time to see beautiful cars. It was an amazing series, a lot of innovation trying to happen in a very special series. Not a lot of cars, but a lot of innovation trying to happen at that time.
Yeah. And I think a Grand Prix win, it's no small feat. It really isn't. So it must have meant a lot to your father to get to that point as well.
You wouldn't know if Dad was happy. So I can't, am I correct, Trevor? He's have the same expression whether happy or not happy. So I think it was always the challenge or the next challenge. A win is good, but you need to win the next one. So it was always that desire for more.
Yeah, it's that disease that a lot of people in motorsport have. It's called it needs to go fasteritis. Have you heard of that, Trevor?
Well, as a designer, the sole object of a race car, as far as I'm concerned, is to win races. If it doesn't win races, it is not a successful race car. And if it doesn't even run a race, it's very notably unsuccessful. So using those criteria, this car you're looking at never participated in a race. So it's basically, from a racing point of view, a total failure at this point in time, and was then. So the object is to win races, and the development of this car to the next variant that you see in the orange car, don't see here, but it's here, that was a very hurried modification that came about as a result of really developing this car to the point where I knew we had two major problems. We actually had more than two, but we had two major problems with it. One, it wouldn't cool properly, and two, it didn't make enough downforce in its original configuration, and three, well, there's a third one. Because it was so wide at the back, because of the air scoops, and those are both air scoops and air directors to when the turning vane that's in the middle of those air scoops closes, it ups the drag of the vehicle and it helps to get air into the rear-mounted radiators. And this car, of course, I haven't mentioned it yet, but it's got a lot of technical features about it. It has more air brake devices on it than anybody ever had the courage to put onto one car. So there's 2 air brakes in the front, there's one that pops out of the rear, and there's 2 in the side pods. So early '69, when the car was, I'll backtrack a little bit. By early '69 or late '68, I had completed the fundamental configuration of the bodywork, and it included, as a very important adjunct, air brakes, which nobody had used since Mercedes in the 1955 Le Mans cars. So I thought it was time to reinvent the air brake, and the FIA in mid-'69, because of all the deaths that were occurring in all motorsports that had variable angled aerodynamic devices and movable aerodynamic devices, Formula One had a lot of crashes due to failure of the aerodynamic device mechanism. They banned all aerodynamic devices in mid-'69. Or mid-'70s, mid-'69, let me get the years straight. So that was a huge blow to me, because one of the important elements of this car were the air brakes. The brakes, especially in the front wheels, were abnormally small. The rear were okay, they're 12-inch discs, but the fronts were notably poor. And as far as high-speed braking goes, the air brakes basically would have doubled the aerodynamic drag of the car, and potentially given us up to a 5G hoped-for deceleration rate.
This is the gentleman who's made my father's dreams come true. This is Jim Bartell. He's the owner of the collection. Sit down, Jim. And he's just done wonderful things my dad was never able to succeed to do. These cars are more beautiful than I ever saw them in any ever state. So I am so pleased that he's been able to do something my dad couldn't. Say hi, Jim.
Please
Hello,
put your hands
everybody.
together for Jim.
Thanks for coming.
Might get this man a water if we can.
I just wanted to bring over the actual tire and a normal front tire to everybody get the perspective. It's difficult to do that without seeing the physical example. That's an original small tire,
Thank
brand
you.
new from the day.
And tell us, what just captivates you about these cars?
Well, I was captivated by this particular prototype when it appeared on the August 1969 Road and Track cover. I was working as an engineer at Ford Motor Company, and the issue came in. I was awestruck, as many people were. And so, 57 years later, the magazine is still in my library, and the car is here. And my mission was to somehow create it, bring it back again. And so this car was created out of all original parts from the prototype, wherever we could. Most of them, 90% of the car, are original prototype parts. And as Trevor said, some of them that worked well and some of them that didn't work so well.
And taking them obviously to Goodwood and taking them Road of America, that must be just so much pride must be wrapped up in that, to see these cars still turning heads and still being a part of motorsport.
That is real satisfaction in being able to share it with everybody worldwide, and bringing it down under this event is just, again, very, very special. None of these cars have ever been here, and they've only been seen on photos or on other methods, and so to see them physically run, that's what we're here for, and so people can appreciate what they are. I don't enjoy these cars when they're standing still. I enjoy them when they're moving.
More than fair, but make sure you sit there and take a break. I can see how hot and sweaty you are, Jim. You've earned your rest. You absolutely have. Sorry, Trevor, go ahead.
I have a comment here, an important comment. I always called Jim the resurrector in chief. because without this gentleman here, there's no way this resurrection process would ever have happened, and we wouldn't be here, and the cars would be relegated to the scrap heap of history, and that's not the case, thank goodness.
Well, massive congratulations to you, Jim.
Yeah, the movable aerodynamic devices on this are exactly to Trevor's specifications. Because of rule change, as he previously said, he never got to run them there originally. But basically, we did them just exactly the way he envisioned them back in the concept. The vanes in the back are actually parts that he made back in 1968. The other pieces they never got to, so we created them to be just exactly what his vision was.
The aerodynamics, the FIA movable aerodynamic device, once that rule came out, we stopped making all of those pieces, and I never expected to see this car run as it was originally designed.
Well, I do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, the rear air dam, when you see it go up with all the holes on it, that was Trevor's use of a patent from the 1955 Mercedes that ran at Le Mans, the 300 SL. And the square edge hole pattern in there is put in because at 100 miles an hour, with the holes in it's 95% as effective as a blank wall. But the driver behind can see through it, so we weren't blinding the driver.
I was a little bit worried, and surprisingly enough, we were able to retain the potential drag available with a holy surface, and pretty interesting to this day.
And I just want to quickly touch on the book as well, because it came out in 2020, Penny, and it does go into all of the background about Don, about Shadow, and of course a background into these wonderful machines as well. Did you have a lot to do with the process of the book as well?
I was asked to supply pictures, and it's very hard to remember back before I was born, so some of it was interesting that Pete Lyon and Dad worked very well. Dad always was a good storyteller, as is Trevor, and they worked together to do it. I was home raising children. I didn't have as much in that. I had nothing to do at that point, but I did help with the book, supplying pictures, a little essay at the end, so it was nice to have a little part in it.
No, fantastic. Well, I know there is so much to see and understand and comprehend about these amazing, amazing cars. They are here all weekend at the Adelaide Motorsport Festival. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the Shadow Car team. Nice and big round of applause. Well, it is fantastic to have another Shadow car back on stage with us, and it's even more fantastic to have not only the mastermind behind its design, of course, it's the young, I feel like young whippersnipper, you absolutely are, in comparison to me, but young talent that gets to drive these things.
I'm not sure, I'm 31 now, you know, I'm getting on, but it's
still younger than me.
It's a real pleasure to drive it, you know, yeah. I mean, it's a special thing. I mean, look at it, what a crazy design. What were you thinking, Trevor?
That's a very good question.
Yeah. Well, before we get into it, we need to give you a round of applause. Please put your hands together for Trevor Harris and Jake Hill. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jake, yeah, we'll get into what you were thinking in a sec, Trev, we will. But we're going to talk a little bit about Jake, because he's got this thing about he thinks that nobody knows who he is.
It's true, yeah.
And it's absolutely untrue, because he is the current British touring car champion. Last year, it was an absolute mega effort. He won 8 races on his way to clinching the title. He's a bit of all right. Hey, Trev, he does really, really well, Trevor. He's a cool young guy.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So, Jake, talk us through last year. What challenges did you have to overcome to clinch that title?
Well, you know, British touring cars just seems to get tougher and tougher every year. You know, I guess much like the supercars here, you know, that's what it is. British touring cars is the supercars of the UK, although the cars aren't quite as cool, in my opinion. But, you know, nonetheless, it's a massive effort, you know. I mean, an awful lot goes into it. you know, from everyone's side, from the design with BMW and West Surrey Racing. So Dick Bennett, who is a New Zealander, he's still the head of West Surrey Racing. He was very famous in the 70s and 80s, running Ayrton Senna, Barrichello, Mika Hakkinen in F3, and it was quite a cool thing because Dick Bennett actually has a crash helmet from all of his champions in a display cabinet. So he has the real Senna helmet, he has the real Mika Hakkinen helmet, and for my crash helmet to join those fellow company in his office was a real nice feat. But yeah, getting back to it, you know, it's 30 races. That's what we have in British touring cars. It's 10 rounds, 30 races, and you know, it's just about being the most consistent person you can be, really. But like I say, I won the most races out of everyone. Didn't actually get a pole position, but lots of fastest laps and, yeah, lots of wins along the way. So it was a good year.
And you're known as a very versatile driver as well. You make sure that you race across different categories. And you tend to win in most things that you get into, which is also a really good trait as a motor racing driver. So, yeah, talk us through why that's important to you. Why do you want to try a bit of everything?
Do you know what? More than anything, I'm just a massive lover of cars, you know, and of motorsport. And I think if I meet a lot of racing drivers who are actually not that fussed about the history or about driving different stuff. They just want to get the paycheck and go home, you know, that's what they want to do. But that's not the case for me. You know, I like to jump in everything I can. My current racing car list is, as of this weekend, up to 115 cars, different cars. Which is pretty cool. So and you know, adding a couple of shadows to that list is really nice. But I just love driving all these different things, and I think it makes you a better driver because each car is not the same. You know, they all offer something completely different with their personality, and I think that makes you a more rounded and just a better racing driver. Full stop.
And I think where you've got the unique design in this car as well, we'll talk a little bit about it and we'll delve into the different things. But going from, a modern BTCC car and then jumping into something as historic like this, do you have to just rewire your brain completely?
Do you know what? It only takes me a lap or so, and you're on top of it, you know. And I think that's the other sign of, you know, someone who's good at their job when it comes to driving racing cars. If it takes them all day, then they probably shouldn't be driving racing cars. But if it takes a couple of laps, then you know you're on it. But this car in particular on stage, it does come with its particular difficulties in the cockpit, as Trevor will talk about in a minute. But it's a real unique thing to drive. It's probably the most difficult car I've driven out of my 115 different racing cars now. And but you know, I quite like that quirk about it. It's different.
Yeah, and you drove it at the 2024 Goodwood Festival of Speed, which is iconic in itself, and it's wonderful that you'll be able to bring this history of shadows to millions of people really around the world. Goodwood is huge, just as Adelaide Motorsport Festival aspires to be, and it's certainly on its way. So for you, that whole experience, talk us through that.
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, you've got to say a big thanks to Jim Bartell. He's the owner of all of these beautiful shadows, and he's asked me to come here to Australia and drive it again, which is a real pleasure. But you know, going to Goodwood is no mean feat, right? I mean, we had an awful lot of shadows there, and I got the either the short straw or the lucky straw. I'm not sure which one, but I got to drive this fantastic car, and it actually won run of the weekend up the hill. So. I went for it, you know, lots of big skids. We even did a donut at the bottom of the hill, which was quite cool. It's got just enough power to do a donut, so that's good. But I loved it, you know, and being at the Festival of Speed was a real treat with it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Trevor, we're going to dive into the design because, yes, this gentleman to my right has to has to contend with unique features like sideways pedals. I can't even make my feet do those things, let alone to drive a car. So please talk us through, you're obviously the brains behind the early design of the Shadow Can-Ams. Talk us through some of the quirky design features in these cars.
Well, these cars have a lot of quirky design features.
We might be here a while.
First of all, I want to once again give credit to Jim Bartell, who is the reason these cars, this one and the black one that's in the garage at the moment, he recreated them from all the original chassis parts are in these cars today, parts that were originally built basically 57 years ago. So Shadow had about a 12-year run of cars, but these two cars here are the very first. And although Shadow in 1970 got a really good sponsorship from Universal Oil Products, UOP, in the beginning, we didn't have any sponsorship for these cars other than Don Nichols, who combined with me to form Shadow Cars. So that was in late 1968 when Don and I met, and I showed him a little mock-up project that I was working on that included a very low-mounted rear engine Porsche flat six engine, or possibly, God forbid, a Corvair flat six engine, but it was to be a ultra competitive Can-Am car that would be smaller, notably smaller than anybody had created before. And because it was notably smaller, it required obviously notably smaller tires to even exist. So in late 68, Don and I went back to Firestone Tire and Rubber Company and promoted them on my project, which required tires, hopefully from them. And we had exactly one meeting, a very rapid meeting, and successfully convinced them to agree to make tires for this car. And the problem for them, of course, in tire development was that they had no other cars that they could help develop the tires on. So until the cars actually could run, obviously the tires couldn't be physically tested. That was an interesting problem during the whole development of the car. The other problems had to do with simply getting the chassis designed, the body designed very early, which is occupied about a 4-month period or less from the end of 68 to first 3 months of 69. I had to do a lot of work because I had nobody else with me to design the car. We were a very small team and building up pretty rapidly, but we never had actually more than 8 people total in a combination of the design department and the construction department, including the body construction.
Wow,
so
only 8 people.
In those days, this business was so totally different. It's unbelievable looking at the Formula One situation today with thousands of design staff and personnel and whatnot, total bureaucracies, and we weren't stuck with the bureaucratic timeline problems for creating parts and getting the job done. So anyway, the object of the car was to simply have lower drag, better cornering power than existing cars because of the extremely low center of gravity, and a width which could be narrower than a standard car because of the lower center of gravity of the whole unit. So much for theory. So we developed the black car, which is here in the garage, first. That was the prototype that led to this car. And the prototype didn't have a wing on it. I thought I could get away without one. That didn't happen. So I had to reinvent the aerodynamics a bit on the car. And the original car had movable aerodynamics, air brakes, 5 air brakes on one car that were air actuated. So the movable aerodynamics were banned in early 1969 because wings on Formula One cars and sports cars were actuated mechanically by mechanisms that entirely too often failed on the racetrack. and there were a lot of deaths in the late 60s due to that. So the elimination of movable aerodynamics had nothing to do with my car, but in a way, everything to do with my car.
Everything to do with your car is very, very unique. And I just want to quickly touch on the sideways pedals, because I think that one in itself is why? Why did you need that? Why did you feel like the car needed those?
Okay, I was fanatically eager to keep the bodywork as low as possible, and George Falmer ended up being our driver, by the way, and an extremely good guy at running this car. So I knew from previous Can-Am cars that I'd worked with that George Falmer drove, he always used only a brake and a throttle to drive the car on the racetrack. He shifted the car without a clutch. So I knew it could be done, and that allowed me to make the lowest front bodywork. The bodywork above the driver's toes is about 10 inches to the ground on this car, and for that reason, given a 2.5-inch ride height, there was no room for the driver to sit in the car with his feet vertical. They had to be splayed out either way. And in a minimal height, basically 8-inch high foot box. So the driver configuration required several elements that turned out to be a bit of a difficulty on the original car. In the original car, the driver laid down, basically laid down, pretty prone, and with a steep angle to his neck, because I wanted him to sit really low in the car, and his driver splayed out either way to the, obviously, hopefully the throttle on the right side and the brake on the left with a hand-operated clutch in it. And the hand-operated clutch was only for getting out of the pits and allowing the car to sit in the pits with the engine running and out of gear. And it was basically not used on the racetrack. So that required the driver to be very good with shifting up and down. And we modified the transmission in several ways to make it shift easier. But forgetting all of that, nobody alive can jump into one of these cars and just drive it right away without having spent some time in it. And given that, at Goodwood last year, Jake basically jumped in the car and had absolutely no practice with it, and did a phenomenal set of runs up the hill, getting him accolades from everybody. Did some fantastic runs that you can see on a YouTube video that you can Google and get at today.
Well, Jake, please just show us, if you wouldn't mind demonstrating, what it's like for you in the car. What do you need to do with your feet?
So my nickname is Flipper when you drive this, because you have to drive it like that, so your feet are laid down, and the throttle and the brake are on top of each other. So you can't have your feet upright like a conventional car. They're completely sprayed apart. So it comes with its own difficulties. If you're in the car for a long time, you can get quite bad cramp in the back of your quad. So it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. But when we go back to the festival speed, which is the plan for this year, we're going to custom make a seat for me. So hopefully I'm a bit more comfortable and we can go even faster.
So how do you even, I guess, train your muscles to be okay with driving like that?
Just get on with it.
Right, okay. That's why I'm not a racing car driver. That's why I don't do it.
No, I hate to say this.
I could not make myself do that.
I hate to say this, but George Falmer, I don't recall him ever having a cramp as a result of driving the car. But George was superhuman in many ways. And also, he ended up, by the time the car actually raced, which was in 1970, he was much more vertical than Jake is in this car right now. We're gonna give him the George Falmer driving position before he runs in the car again, which will be at Goodwood next year. and or this year, as the case may be, and I think he'll run cramp-free, I hope.
It should be a bit better once I can actually sit in the car properly. So that's the aim.
And out of the two cars, which ones have you been actually piloting this weekend?
So I've been driving this car predominantly. This is the one I came to drive. Obviously, Craig Lowndes was in the Mark III, and Ross, who's actually our head mechanic for Era Motorsport, he's done quite a lot of racing, and he was driving the Mark I prototype. So yeah, that's been the case for the Shadows. I've also been driving the Formula 5000 Shadow, which is an absolute joy to drive. Sorry, Trevor, but the seating position in the 5000 is a little bit nicer than this one. But having said that, yeah, it's been a real treat. Unfortunately, we've broken a cam in this car, so we're not going to be able to run it today. So apologies to everyone who really wanted to see it run. We really wanted to run it, but these things happen, you know. It's very old, you know, and we can only throw so many new bits at it. So it is what it is for now, but we'll have it running again at some point soon, and give it another go.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's just quickly touch on designing these cars within the regulations that you could at the time, Trevor, because you sort of touched on the fact that you had to get tyres actually made for it, and then different rules brought in by the FIA then made certain different things difficult for you. So can you just run us through a little bit of how you would have this concept and then try and actually make it fit into the regulations that you were dealing with?
Well, of course, the object is, you have to make the car adhere to the regulations of the time. And as I said, the regulations became a bit of a moving target in 1970. So because of aerodynamic reasons on the original car and cooling reasons and several other issues, this configuration I arrived at as a result of the development of the early car, which took place over about a 6-month period after we received our first tires. So as far as development problems go, or development issues go, the tires were a huge development problem for Firestone, much more of a development problem than they expected. But I encountered many development problems that I hadn't expected also. So anyway, there came a time when it was necessary, because of cooling issues, to put the radiators some other place on the car. And obviously there was no room in the front of the car ever, and the only room in the back of the car for potential cooling, proper cooling, was the top of the wing, which allowed us to use, for the first time, a radiator. The radiator performed two functions. They really cooled the car well. They're extremely small and could actually be about half the size they are and still cool that engine effectively. And there were also a spoiler on the wing, which increased the wing's downforce. So that became my configuration that turned out to only be allowed to run at Motorsport, because the SCCA, which ran Can-Am racing at that time, decided that they would allow us to run the car in that configuration, but only at Motorsport. And then it had to somehow or another be modified so that the radiators were not on the top of the wing. That led to a different variation which followed this car and ran only one race, and that was at St. Javy after the first run at Motorsport. So anyway, at Motorsport, we ran this configuration. George Falmer qualified 6th overall with the car. Every car ahead of him on the grid had 494 cubic inches. This ran an iron 427 engine, and George did really well until, unfortunately, in the race, the car overheated, not because not because of the radiator configuration, but something happened in the engine and it overheated and had to drop out of the race. So that was it.
That's motorsport, isn't it?
This configuration only ran one race ever, Mosport, 1970. So it's the most amazing thing to me is that Jim has basically brought this car back from the dead and produced a car here that includes a tremendous number of original components, some of which I built myself. The original monocoque is complete, undented, unbelievably good looking. The external look of this car is better than it ever was in the day. The finish is better. There isn't anything on this car that today isn't better than the original car.
Yeah, and we thank Jim very, very much for bringing them all, and of course all around the world as well. We feel privileged to have the cars all here this weekend, so thank you very much for bringing them to the Adelaide Motorsport Festival. I do just quickly want to touch on before we end, Jake, you're getting in yet another car today, completely different. I think you've been trying to talk yourself into, there was a Skyline you talked yourself into, been trying to get you in several different things while you're here, but what are you driving this afternoon?
So originally I was supposed to drive one of the Red Bull Holden V8 supercars, which would have been awesome, but unfortunately they're not here. So Adelaide Motorsport Festival have kindly put me in Marcus Ambrose's 2014, I believe, Ford Fusion NASCAR, which is going to be wicked. So I'm really looking forward to that. We're out, I believe, half one. Yep. So yeah, really excited. I've never driven a NASCAR before. So yeah, we'll give it some big skids and try and have some fun.
Absolutely, and then we need to get you in a supercar ASAP. We need to make that happen.
We're working on it.
Yes. Okay, great news.
So on one slightly non-automotive note, I want to once again thank so much the organizers of this event for producing such an interesting event with such good food in certain areas. And it's just an amazing place, an amazing event. I'd love to come back again, and all the best.
We'd love to have you, Trevor. We'd absolutely love to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Trevor Harris and Jake Hill.